I could have your attention, please. Thank you, Jen. What a great crowd we have here today, and what an honor it is for me to introduce Paula Lillard Preschack. Paula has been engaged in Montessori education for decades. She was a teacher at Forest Bluff School, which was founded by Paula Lillard, who's here today, along with Lynn Jessen, who's here today. And Paula ran the school for many years. And she has a book coming out next year called The Montessori Potential. So she's very engaged in Montessori and has been for many years. And all of our children went to Forest Bluff. And at the start, it's safe to say it was a leap of faith. Many others may feel that because it's not a traditional education. There's really little homework. There's no grades, no sports teams, and the children bring their own lunch to school. There's no cafeteria. But Trish and I were both so happy that we sent our kids there. You know, Montessori education fosters independence and curiosity, and it's just a great education choice, I would say. Paula will give a short presentation, and then she's looking forward to a lively discussion. So ask as many questions as you can, especially those who are not familiar with Montessori, to find out a lot about it. Anyway, let's give a warm welcome to Paula.
Thanks. So do I need to hold this? Or
Nope,
you
you
can put
can
it on the
put it
stand if you want, but you just point it. Teacher voice. Yep, my teacher voice. Good, good, good. Okay. Thank you. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so honored that you would spend your Friday lunch with me, and especially Lucy Bickford. It's her birthday, and she decided this is how she wanted to spend her lunch. So I am really, really honored. That is the hugest compliment to me. And Lucy, I'm going to try to really make it worth it for you. So I'll start by just orienting you a little bit. My parents are here, John and Paula Lillard. I'm pitching myself that my parents are here. It's so wonderful. I feel like the luckiest person in the world. And we came from Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, and moved here. I was born in Ohio, the youngest of 5 daughters, and we moved here when I was 2. Lived in the east side of Lake Forest on Meadow Lane, and pretty quickly my sisters and mother were not very happy that they had been moved from Ohio, where they had horses and ponies in the backyard and nature, and we came here to East Lake Forest. So my father moved us to way out west Lake Forest. I mean, for any of you that were here in the early 70s, you know that it was like the Wild West out there. It was so far away that people wouldn't let their children come to play at our house unless we agreed to have them for like 4 days. So they wouldn't have to drive all the way back over to Waukegan Road to get us. But that's where I grew up, here in Lake Forest, and I love it very much. My husband and I have been so happy to be raising our own children here. I went to a Montessori school in Winnetka, Ronald Knox Montessori School, until I was 6 years old. My mother knew a bit about Montessori at that time. And then I went to Lake Forest Country Day School, 1st grade all the way through the 9th grade. I went away to boarding school for high school, and then to Hampshire College in Massachusetts, and then got my master's in education and the training for Montessori, to be a Montessori teacher. I came back here to teach at the school that Lynn, my sister Lynn, and my mother Paula founded with Jay Lenari here in Lake Bluff. And I taught for many years, and then ran the school, as David mentioned, and taught some of your children, some of the people here in the room, and some of you were students. We have some graduates here in the room. So welcome to everyone. I'm really happy that we have such a mix of participants, and I would like this to be interactive. So what I plan to do is I'm going to ask you a question and ask you for a little participation, and then I'm going to give a short presentation. and then ask if people would like to ask questions and have a dynamic discussion. Because what I'm hoping is that everyone here walks out of this building with your brow furrowed because you're thinking, but your heart full of hope, because when you see the next bad news on the news, you will have a feeling there's something we can do about these problems. And it has to do with education and the way that we educate our children. So I'd like to, I just wanted to mention too, yes, I did write a book. So if any of you are going to be leaving early, this is it. I just got it the other day, but you won't be able to get it till February 7th when it's released. Please take the postcards on your table, which invite you to a book signing in April, and pre-order the book with that bookmark there. Please take the bookmarks, share them with people. And when you pre-order, you might be able to get the book early. I'm hoping that this book is going to answer many questions people have about Montessori, that it's going to address the issues that we have in Montessori and in education, and that it is what you can give to other people to help them to understand and really say, this is a really compelling example of education and what it could be. How can we make this happen? Let's think about this. So I'm hoping you will get copies and use this book, that it will be useful for you. So to begin with, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you believe young children need to learn to survive and thrive in today's world and the uncertain future? Think about what's happening in our world right now. What characteristics, what abilities do you believe a child will need? And you can shout it out and I'll repeat it for those who are online.
Resilience.
Resilience.
That they're loved.
That they're loved.
Confidence.
Confidence.
Compassion.
Compassion.
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
Feeling of mastery over learning something.
Feeling of mastery over learning something.
Hope.
Hope. Okay, you'll find some more traits that may be important on the back of that bookmark on your table, because these are traits that I keep seeing in Montessori graduates. And this young person is going to need to be able to solve problems well, is going to need to be able to think creatively, is going to need to be able to work well with others. Anything else that you think of?
Adaptability.
Adaptability.
Discipline.
Discipline, like self-discipline, right? Okay, so we have to then ask ourselves, how do we help children to develop these traits? And what is happening? What are we doing in our schools that helps children to meet these developmental needs that they have? So you think about how most schools around the world look, and if we were in another country, it wouldn't look too dissimilar, right? We might have children sitting on the floor instead of desks. They might be sitting on benches, but everybody is basically grouped by the same age. They learn to compare their work with grades. We teach them to compete with each other for scores, for prizes, for positions in the school or the classroom. We give them information in about 6-week units of study, and then we test them on whether they learned that information, and then we move on to a new topic. Someone else decides and chooses for them what they need to know and what they're going to study and learn about. It might be the teacher who decides, it might be the program that they're in that dictates what they're going to learn. Politicians who are deciding. And when you think about that for a moment, you think about how would you stand that? How would that if somebody told you, I'm going to tell you today what you're going to do, where you're going to sit, what you're going to learn, what you're going to do for your job? I mean, there are countries where this happens, right? And we know how that affects human beings. Everyone studies the same thing at the same time, basically, typically at the same pace, which is determined by the teacher or by the program. Subjects change every 50 minutes or so. We have math, and then the teacher says it's time to put away your math books. Now we're going to take out English language, right? Or another topic. So we have to really think about whether this model is working. People have been struggling with how to teach to the individual needs in community for 100 years and longer. You think about why we came up with this model. It was really for efficiency, right? To educate the masses during the Industrial Revolution. And we've been stuck in this model. We have not been able to really step out and think, why do we do school this way? Why do we do school this way? So we've had these progressive movements in education where we think, okay, children learn better when they use their hands. There's so much research that says children learn better, people learn better when they can learn from each other, when they can do something collaboratively, when there's choice. There's so much research that supports other ways of doing things. But then these progressive movements start and then they snap back when they don't have enough structure to really get good results. So we have this problem where we swing back and forth in our education system from very progressive to back to this over and over. And we all feel that there's some better way. There's got to be a better way. But it's been very, very difficult to get out of this mindset and to really think, why are we doing it this way if children need to learn to work together and have compassion and hope and all the things that you just mentioned? But Maria Montessori, who was an Italian doctor in the early 1900s, did come up with a way that you can meet individual needs in community. And you do actually foster and develop the very traits that you just mentioned and that are on the back of that bookmark, as well as many, many others. So she did this by looking at human development. How do human beings move? How do they learn? What are they doing? And she watched them as a scientist to figure out what do they need and how can we meet those needs. So this is a Montessori classroom. These children are ages 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old. So they're grouped together by their needs rather than by their age. And the teacher here you see is down on the floor with the children, in amongst them. There's an environment set up. There's a classroom set up that has all the topics on the shelf. So you see in the background that they're seeing how all the subjects are related because they see that there's geography, there's geometry, there's botany, there's math. All of this is out all the time. So they see the interrelationships of all of these subjects. They come into the room, they're able to choose what they are interested in and what they would like to do. The teacher draws them in by saying, I have something to show you. And she or he shows the children something new that they can work with. And the child then works with materials that demonstrate abstract concepts concretely. And so the child, by using these materials and working with them in the way they were shown, makes the connections themselves and the aha, and they discover the information themselves rather than being told the information. So what's happening here, these are 3 5-year-olds, and they're learning about division. So they have a number there of 9,999. And these big cubes represent thousands. And the little beads represent a unit. So they start out with the unit. 10 of those units together on a bar is a 10. 10 of those 10s together makes a square, that's 100. And 10 of those squares together makes a cube, and that's 1,000. So they've learned that from the time they were 4. They've now been doing that for a long time, and they can count and they understand that this is 9 of these thousands, 9 of these hundreds, 9 of these 10s, and 9 of these units. And she is sharing out to the children, because division is sharing out equally amongst you and giving them these amounts. So they're all counting together, and she's asking, what do you think we are doing here? And they're involved in it. So there's a lot of movement that's happening here. The children are actually picking up the trays, walking back and forth over to the shelf where they might need to exchange. You know, when you have a 10, you need to get 5. So you need to go back over and you need to exchange for units so you can break it up and share it out. So they're actually moving, they're thinking, they're counting, they're totally engaged, and they understand what they're doing. And they'll do this over and over. It's fun. It's like a game. So this is how they're learning division. And you can see that there are other children who've brought their work over so that they can watch because they're interested. This boy here is working on either his addition or multiplication equations, and he's finding the answer with his fingers and writing down the answers so he can study those. And this little boy here in the corner, he's just 3 years old. He's working on something else, but he's watching, he's listening. That is, he's absorbing that. So in this model, we have movement, we have touching, we have thinking, we have working together and collaborating, we have listening, we have all of these aspects are being developed through the work that's happening. Nobody is sitting around waiting for something to happen, right? So for this to happen, Montessori looked at the child and said, human beings are active learners. We are not born to sit and listen. We are born to interact. You look at the baby, look at babies, they crawl, they touch everything, they want to put everything in their mouths, they're exploring. That's how they learn to talk and walk. Not because we sat them in a seat, strapped them in and showed them a screen and said, this is how you walk and talk, okay? They have to be doing it, right? And they taught themselves by doing it. So Montessori said that just can keep continuing your whole life. You learn from interacting with your environment. So if that's true, then there are 3 things that are necessary that we should give them for an education, for school to help them. The first is a prepared environment. So we need to create a classroom or a space for this active learner that they can interact with and where they can find out all about math, all about language, all about geometry, all about geography, all about everything, the seeds and beginnings of everything in one place. So we need a prepared environment. So she designed environments that would meet the needs of that age group with their characteristics and needs that that age group has. So you see these physical materials that she designed. The second thing that you need is a prepared adult, an adult who has been trained in how to present these materials to children, in how to really see children as active learners and not as empty buckets to fill with information. So the teacher is no longer standing at the front of the room telling everybody at the same time what to do. She or he is now down in amongst the children, gathering groups, showing them things, helping people who need help. So you walk into a Montessori room, it's like a workroom of artists and scientists and mathematicians, and everybody's doing something interesting at the same time. And that's how they learn from each other. So the adult links the child to the environment. They don't let them just wander around all day long. They say, oh, I have something to show you over here. Oh, you haven't done a lot of math lately. Let's come on over here. Let me show you something. And this, in this picture, she's showing this 18-month-old how to peel a zucchini. And then she's going to show him how to cut the zucchini. And then he's going to put the zucchini in the bowl, the pieces, and he's putting the scraps in the other. And this may seem just really adorable, but there's actually a lot that's going on here. This child is learning process, sequence. This is going to be discarded, and this part we're going to prepare and put in here, and then we put it in the little refrigerator. He carries it over, puts it in the tiny refrigerator. Later we bring it out and we distribute it to our friends and we have a meal, and then we go clean the dishes. And he starts to understand sequences. That's preparing the brain for language, for math, for science. It's preparing the brain. The child is ready to prepare their brain. We need to give them purposeful things to do so that they can do that. And the teacher is also modeling behavior. This is how we sit. This is how we move. The child is absorbing all of the adults' behaviors. We also need a third thing, because those first two things are wonderful, but they don't do much for you if you don't also have this third thing, which is a balance of freedom and responsibility, or choices and boundaries. So we need to give children choices, but we also need to support them with boundaries that help to guide them. So I love this picture so much because this young man is on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood that is not the easiest to grow up in, I would say. And look at his hands, his whole expression. I just think he is so magnificent. And I watched him, he is writing in his journal. Every day in elementary classrooms, the Montessori children write down what they just worked on and then what they're about to do, so that they can start managing their time and seeing, here's what I've been doing, and here's what I'm planning to do. 6 years old, we can start with this. So he is in a great spot here. So here are other children in this school, and look at their eyes, how interested they are in what they're learning. So their teacher is telling them about the role of fruit in the life cycle of the plant, and she's brought in a real avocado. This is a public school in Chicago, and she has a booklet here that's telling the scientific names of the parts of fruits, and they're matching them up and talking about them. And so what makes all of this work is that you've got the prepared environment, the prepared adult, then you have freedom and responsibility in balance. And then we have the Montessori curriculum, which you can think of as like seeds that the teacher spreads out and says, I have something interesting to show you over here. Let me show you this. So this curriculum, the path and the stories and the information that we then show the children with these presentations. And then what she'll do is leave them to explore and work with those materials. And they might decide they want to make a chart where they draw all these different kinds of fruits, or they want to bring in fruits and dissect them and write down all the parts, or they go home that night and they see foods and they start taking them apart and seeing why is the strawberry seeds on the outside of the fruit? And then they want to explore more and more and more. So they end up doing research. They want to go to the library and find out, why are fruits like this? All the teacher did was plant a little seed of information to excite all of that curiosity and help guide them to make it into something, make it into a project. So this goes on day after day. And that is how you cover so much information. You end up covering much more information than you would if you said, okay, everybody sit still, you're going to learn the same math at the same time, and we're going to try to get through all of this by Christmas. So this way, it's like the horse is out of the barn and way down the road, and there's just so much happening, and the teacher is just trying to keep it all going. So you cover a lot of information. You can see here, he looks like he's 35, but he's 2 years old. And he is trying to get the thread through the eye of the needle so that he can do some sewing. So why would we show a 2-year-old how to sew? Because look at the hand-eye coordination, the control of the fingers, the focus, the engagement in what he's doing. It's challenging. And when it's challenging and there's just the right match of challenge, that's what engages us. That's what makes us get into flow in our lives. So the teacher is constantly looking for what's going to challenge that child, what's going to challenge this child in this moment. So there he is, totally engaged. So these qualities of getting engaged in developing focus, they happen all day long, day after day, year after year for a child in a Montessori program. And that's why they still have those traits in adulthood. They want to get engaged. They are ready to focus. They're organized. They're collaborative. So here's some children. They're about 7 or 8 years old in this picture. They are dividing fractions by fractions, and they're using this material to do that. And they're doing problem after problem after problem after problem. It is so much fun because you get to work with your friends. You work out all your issues together. You got to figure out how to make this happen. And so you can see Montessori just gets better and better and better and better as you get older. These natural tendencies and needs that children have are met by the way that we're teaching them. So age 7 and 8, these children really want to be together. They want to be social with each other. Remember that being that age, you couldn't wait for lunch or to get on the bus or for recess so you could talk with each other. So here we're bringing them together on purpose and saying, let's do something purposeful. Let's work together. And that is how you develop your character. And you start learning, oh, I'm kind of pushy, or she keeps taking over. You won't do anything. You hear these comments, you hear them working it out. Well, she really, but they do it here. And they do it because they want to figure out, let's do more and more and more math problems. And that's where this develops. So we're helping them instead of fighting their nature. These children also learn to be very respectful of each other and very resourceful. So this 3-year-old has gone to this 5-year-old and asked him to help him tie his shoelace. And the reason this is so beautiful, because the 5-year-old is still interested in tying shoelaces. You know, if you asked an 8-year-old to be, but a 5-year-old is just in the same age group, the same stage of life where these same things still interest them, and they're able to be a helper to a younger child. So this child's been pretty resourceful. There's only one teacher in the room for all these children on purpose. Now, so many people think, oh, it'd be so great if we had a higher ratio of more teachers so that children could get a lot of attention. But it's actually not that great for them because they need to be resourceful. So he's gone to this other boy and asked him to help him tie his shoelaces. And he's learning a lot from watching him tie his shoelaces. You can see there. They learn to be curious, collaborative, courageous. These are adolescents on a trip who are doing some building. And you notice in all these pictures, there's no teacher around. They've been shown how to do something and the adult is there to help, but they really are allowed to do so much on their own and with each other. So they really develop this great courage, and they're checking to see if the board they've put in is level and whether it's okay to start putting in the soil, and they're building a structure together that has purpose. It's valued in the adult world. It's something that adults need them to do, and they feel a sense of being valued. So here we have the result. It's a 14-year-old who has come all the way through this kind of experience, ready for high school now. He knows a lot of all the different subjects of knowledge, so a tremendous amount of knowledge. He is used to being resourceful and finding information in the environment instead of always going to a teacher or one source of information. That's one source, but there are many, many sources for this person. And he's doing a project on his own that he's come up with, studying a certain aspect of American history. He's writing with his beautiful handwriting. He's illustrating it to support his points. He's going to present it to his class with enthusiasm and head into high school feeling very confident and ready for the next stage of his life. So we think, what is the potential of any human being? We really can't know, but if we support them by meeting their needs and characteristics at each stage of their life, we think about what the world could be like if more children had that support all the way through. And I know you'll have many questions, which hopefully more will be answered in the book that is coming out. And I have a website as well that tells you much more information. I hope you'll share it with others and really dig into this question of, why do we educate children the way we do? And is there a better way? So I'd love to open this up now to questions. Don't feel shy about challenging anything that I've said. That's what this is. That's why this is fun, because we get to be together and find out what different people think and different experiences all coming together. So any question we can start off with. Yes.
Would you say that your book is education under the heading of education, or is it informational, everything you wanted to know about Montessori?
I would say it's everything you wanted to know about Montessori, but it's hopefully a conversation starter, right? Sort of the springboard that I hope people will go from. But it will help parents. The biggest audience is parents. It will help parents to understand Montessori better. It will help teachers to think about how we teach. You know, what's called now best practices in education, learning with your hands, interactive learning, having children of different age groups working together. All of these pieces are what are called best practices in education. What Montessori does is bring them all together and make it into a structure that actually works. But anything that we change in education that goes closer towards Montessori is an improvement. So I hope that answers a little bit. Teachers, administrators will learn something about it. I talk about Montessori schools and how those schools are designed, how they're run. There's a chapter for parents about home life. If your children cannot go to a Montessori school, what can you also do at home? How can we raise them with some of these values from home? And a school about chapter about public schools and what's happening in public school Montessori. So sort of trying to give the spectrum of all the issues that come up.
You didn't mention politicians.
Politicians?
You're trying to influence the change.
Yes.
And how we're going to make sure our local education get away
Yes.
from what's
Right.
so much
What we're so ingrained in.
psychology.
Right. And someone mentioned today concerns about technology coming into schools. And why are we doing this? Or is anybody stopping to really think about what human beings need for development? Or are they just thinking about making money or what's going to be popular, or it's the latest thing, so it must be good? Well, we've been doing this for decades, you know, swinging all over the place. If everyone just stopped for a moment and watched children, they would start to come up with some of these ideas. And so I saw another question or comment over here. Yes.
I just wondered how much is about in your book the timeline. To me, that was probably the magical piece that hold everything together.
You mean the continuity?
Yes,
From
rolling of the little man to
Yes,
present.
yes. That's a really good point, Mary. One of the real strengths of Montessori is looking at every child's life as a continuum. So we don't just think this is the 3-year-old. We think this is a 3-year-old who was an infant and is going to someday be 13 years old and then 30 years old. So we're always looking at the continuums. There's a lot of continuity in Montessori where the same materials come up, but they're used differently, where the environment is different, the child changes, and it's really remarkable. I taught a group of children in the primary level, which is 3 to 6 year olds. So I taught them when they were 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old. And then I actually moved to the elementary with a group at one point. So I knew the same children really, really well when they were younger. It was like they were completely different people. They changed so much in certain stages of their development, and there are these points where that happens. So yes, I think Montessori was just brilliant in watching. She watched for decades all over the world, children in different settings, to really understand what is continuous and what is consistent about human development, no matter where you're living, who you are, what you're coming from, what culture you're in, what is the same about us, and how can we meet those needs? So more questions. Yes.
It's just that I wanted to remind us, I remember learning this from my daughters at your school, is
Yes.
the technology that a lot of the parents who develop the technology don't allow their children to use them. And I'm wondering the reason why, I can't remember what.
Well, that's a great point. No, I think you're alluding to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah, Silicon Valley families. They are the first people that don't let their children touch technology. I wonder why. Maybe they know something that most people don't know, right? That's a really, really good point.
Designs that they get the happy things when they push the button.
Okay, yep. There's a lot.
I know that it's designed for that, and that's
Right.
what I'm worried about.
Right. You know, people get concerned that we should start giving our children technology because otherwise they won't know how to use it.
No.
Well, think about the fact that a monkey could operate some of these machines. It might be hard for you and I because we're older and sometimes, it doesn't, we're not as curious as they are to just, well, let's push that button. What does that button do? What does this button? You watch someone younger and they go like, I can't figure this out because we're trying to think of it in a different way and they just start experimenting. But they're not going to have a problem figuring out how to use technology. But what they will have a problem with is if they don't develop and build a thinking mind. And that's really the painful worry that I have about what's happening in education with all of this technology. They can't think. And who designs the technology? Who's working on the computers? It's all these people who have a creative mind that they developed from playing and working with sticks and being out in nature and had nothing to do with machines. They developed a creative thinking brain and then they designed all of these programs. There are many famous people in computers who went to Montessori school. And I'll just say one other thing too, because for some of you in the room, I was just talking to somebody yesterday, ironically, about my technology because I was having an issue. And at the end, he said, we're virtual. And at the end, he said, I live in Oklahoma and I have to tell you, my daughter went to Montessori and I was the greatest thing we ever did. And he went on and on and on and on and on about it. And she's in 7th grade now. Oh, she's at the top of her, blah, blah, blah. She's went for like 2 years when she was 3. But I hear this over and over and over. There's something very powerful for those of you whose children were able to be in Montessori when they were really young. It's a very, very powerful time of brain development and personality development and the way you think and the way you carry yourself and all of that. And that is why it's so valuable to get it to these children in situations where they can have that when they're really little. If it's the only time that we can give it to them, if we give it to them when they're really little and they never have it again, they will have that in them. And so it's really, really important that we try to spread Montessori for that preschool age everywhere that we can and support those programs and try to get them to happen. So, yes, George.
Yeah, I just want to echo the one comment about timeline. And I think what you were referring to was just how powerful it is to hear like what each age range of children are working on, what they're learning, what those special things are. That they're reflecting these traits that maybe they're not getting potentially conventional educational systems. So, if you have something in the book that's a nice succinct summary.
Yes,
The full range of Montessori from 18
Yes.
months to 8th grade.
yes,
So people will have a feel for what's available.
yes.
Under the, say, Montessori.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yep, great point. So what I'm really excited about is so often I get questions that are in the book and I think, yes, yes, yeah, it's in there, it's in there. The first chapter talks about what Montessori called the 4 planes of development, which is really these 4 distinct stages that we go through in our childhood. And how do we, what kind of environment meets the needs of children under age 6? What kind of characteristics and needs do they have? And what does the environment look like to meet the needs of ages 6 to 12, 12 to 18, and so on? So that right away, people start to see that. And then we come back to that again at the end when we talk about home life, because you might have a 5-year-old and you have a 10-year-old. And why do we treat them differently? It's not because they're just older. It's because the 10-year-old thinks completely differently than the 5-year-old. And we need to be thinking about their different needs. Some children we need to get home because the younger ones need to go to bed. This one is able to handle something different, but also it's the way we talk to them. The older child has a reasoning mind. They're imagining things. They're really in a different place. The younger child is absorbing. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to say to a young child, all the reasons why you need to go home from the park. People get tired of explaining, and then their 7-year-old is really does want to talk about why things are the way they are, and the parent's tired, but they need to flip it and say, it's time to go because it's time to go. And then when they're older, well, it's because of, so we change to meet the needs of the age group that we're working with. So, yes, Margaret.
Do you have any sense of how the Montessori method is spreading in underserved communities?
Yes.
Here, Chicago, this US, around
Yes.
the world, because if the magic's gonna happen, you have to start in places that don't have
A lot of resources. Mhm. Yes, yes. There's a lot happening, and it's really exciting because when I took my training to teach elementary Montessori, it was in the early 90s, and there weren't that many schools in the United States for me to apply to. I mean, there were lots, but a few years, there were tons. And now so many Montessori schools, so many of them just would go until 1st grade. So now there's so many Montessori schools that go up through 8th grade. And there are actually lots of Montessori schools who are going through high school. So we also see it spreading into public schools. There's 6 Montessori public schools in Chicago. There are 9, I think, in Milwaukee. And we're just starting right here. I mean, you go all the way up to California and Texas and all over the country. There are Montessori programs in public schools, all kinds of neighborhoods, and people are getting excited about trying Montessori in situations where they've tried a lot of other things and nothing has worked. There's some beautiful stories of what's happening with that. One of the biggest issues that we have is that people will get excited about it, but they don't really want to spend too much time learning about the details of how to make it work. And so someone will say, we're going to make our entire public school Montessori tomorrow. And then they buy all the materials and they throw it at the teachers. And now all the children are supposed to be able to do this, and they've never had any of it. And then it goes, it's a storm. And then people say, oh, it doesn't work. And so they start to pull back instead of really understanding how to build from the youngest ages. This is probably going to be my next thing that I would like to get involved in now that I've written the book, is in a few years after going around with this, is, you know, helping people. How do you start these kinds of programs to make a difference? You start with the youngest ones very slowly, kind of like the way we started our school. We had 15 children, one teacher. We rented out a building, a room in a building, didn't spend a lot of money, very gradually grew and grew and grew and grew, made sure teachers had training before they were with the children. So when you go and see Montessori schools, you'll see a lot of variety. And that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we've had. You know, you think, oh, this is amazing. Why isn't it everywhere? Well, it's because it's when people misinterpret it or they rush to start doing it without really understanding it. You'll see Montessori, all kinds of interpretations, because nobody has to, it's not a patented name. You could start a Montessori school right down the street and say it's Montessori and have nothing to do with Montessori. There's nobody who's going to come and tell you that you can't do that. So it's very confusing for parents. They think, okay, that was Montessori. It was a bad experience. I'm never doing that again. And then their friend is talking about how it's so wonderful. Or someone will move from one city to another and find, oh, it's Montessori, but it's not really Montessori. So I'm hoping this book will help, because I talk about that issue and I talk about what does real Montessori look like and what's the potential with it. That's why it's called the Montessori potential. And so I want to inspire people to work towards that. Not everybody has all the resources to go all, you know, to be like Forest Bluff School, but they can keep working towards it and knowing that it exists, and knowing that if you do that, the potential for the children and the results are outstanding. So we want to be encouraging everyone to work towards that and not say, oh, that's not real Montessori, so you shouldn't do it at all. Any kind of little bit of Montessori is better than nothing, but we want to keep moving towards the ultimate goal and what's possible. I want to be mindful of the time.
There's one problem in Illinois, when they start Montessori schools or call them Montessori schools, people have to have an Illinois teaching certificate. So they don't want to go back to school for a whole year to learn how to do Montessori. They're already getting their salary, nothing change. So there's so many so-called Montessori schools in the city where the teachers don't have any training.
Right. Right. So getting training. So one of the ways, if you're really interested in this, one of the ways to support Montessori schools and is to support Montessori training centers and help people to get access to training. This has actually changed a lot since the pandemic, because it used to be very strict the way you had to get training. And now it's just, there's so many different ways now to get training. Partly virtual, partly in person, in modules. So that's been a really positive thing that came out of it. How about some of you for whom this just sounds very bizarre, or you've never seen anything like this, or you think I'm crazy, or, you know, let's hear some of, anybody have any question or comment that they'd like to ask about, or does it make a lot of sense to you? Does it feel intuitive? Yes.
Well, that way, how do Montessori kids transition into traditional school so they can really see the difference of both here? And I'm wondering if there's issues on either the education,
Right.
parents' front or the child's front going
Right.
into the more traditional program.
Great question. We hear that all the time. That is the big question people have, is what happens when the child then goes into a regular school system. The older they are and the more Montessori they've had, the better that transition for them, because they've developed these traits. So when a child walks into a conventional school classroom, they want to engage, they're able to focus, they're pretty organized, they're collaborative, they're eager to learn, and teachers will say, teach a child anything if I have an eager learner, but I can't teach a child who doesn't want to learn anything. And that's the frustration that, you know, that sometimes they're dealing with when children are kind of shut down. So they come in with a lot of enthusiasm. And we see children transition out of Montessori when they're 4, when they're 5, when they're 10, when they're 14, whatever age they go. Parents report that after the initial adjustment, and there's always an adjustment, if you move from one place to another, there'd be an adjustment, no matter what the differences are between them. But once they've gotten past those few weeks of adjusting, they figure it out, and they're so adaptable. They're so adaptable because they've been learning to adapt all the time. And they've been resourceful, and they feel, I'm the one who needs to learn. I'm going to teach myself this topic with this book. So they are primed to take advantage of whatever any kind of school or learning environment has to give them. Whether they're a little frustrated, whether they find it kind of boring compared to what they've had, we hear that sometimes, but typically they have enough momentum that they figure out how to make it interesting and how to do that. Yes.
The other comment I would add to that is we have 4 children that were and we were about from 18 months to 8th grade and then go to high school. And I would say the other real strength of the program is time management skills. They've been used to managing their time. And I saved all their journals because they're very charming. They math at 9:07. We switched to English at 11. Knowing what they have, the work they need to get done, and then their ability to figure it out on their own was, I think, their biggest advantage.
Yeah, thank you. And
Yeah, and the only other comment I'd make about that I've noticed with a lot of Montessori children, and ours included, is they're also not scared to try to face something that's uncomfortable. So, when they went to high school, I had one of my children say, look, I took the test and the teacher took it away from me because it wasn't close to being done. They weren't used to that pace. And frustrated a little, but just wanted to go back and figure out how to do that. So they've had to sit down and learn, like Connie said, how to figure things out. And they're really not scared of it, where a lot of other kids would be frozen by the idea that I'm in this classroom that's so different and this is so different. But they're not scared. I mean, they're very brave about, being able to try things and sort it out and feel comfortable.
yeah, I that always really amazes me, the courage that they have. And where I think that comes from is that when they learn with the materials that self-correct, they find their own mistakes. Somebody isn't there saying, these are the ones you did wrong. They work with the material and they go, it's not working right. And they self-correct. And there's nobody there shaming them. There's no comment about your failure or your inability to do something. They learn how to fix it. They go to each other for help. Nobody's competing with each other. And it actually sets you up to handle competition very well later. So you would think it'd be the opposite, but it's sort of like, why would you get somebody ready for a famine by starting to starve them? You're actually better off having as much food as you can before the famine starts. And that's kind of what this is like for them. They handle challenges really well. That's really a great story. Yes, Jenny.
I also have a little anecdote to speak to this, and I've told this story before, but it's so powerful to me. So I work with a lot of Lake Forest High School students on just academic support, and they come to my home. And I was working a couple years ago with this junior young man, very bright, but I think probably not a really high achiever in school. I think he had sort of taken on the role of being the class clown and went with that for his entire high school career. But I could see that he was really, really smart and capable. And he saw my kids, they were milling around as they do. And he said, "Oh, where do your kids go to school? Do they go to the local school?" I said, "No, they go to the Montessori school in Lake Bluff." He goes, oh, the Montessori school, the Montessori kids in all my classes are the smartest. And I said, well, that's actually not true.
Yeah.
I said, they're not the smartest. They are, they've learned how to learn, and they've learned how to be resourceful, and they've learned how to advocate for themselves. And he paused and got really contemplative and said, yes, that's it. I wish I had that.
Yes, right, right. I think that, you know, it's because going back to that, one of those first things that I mentioned, teaching the individual. When an individual is respected for being on their own path and able to develop their own self, whatever that is, and we support that, that person becomes their best self. So I think a lot about people who, I was just with one of our graduates the other day, and he came to meet with me with his wife about something. And the whole time we were talking, he was doing this. And I said, you know, the wife was asking about, you know, what if a child learns differently and, you know, they have ADHD or something. I said, well, I know people who never sat down, but that was okay. There was no problem. You were allowed to stand up and you could work this way. And there are certain people who literally can't think when they're made to sit still. They have to move. I had a child who would rock back and forth, and he would say, you know, Azerbaijan and Laos and, you know, all the names of Vietnam and all the names of the countries, but he had to move. He had to move. And so here's a person who in a different school setting would have been constantly in trouble, told you're not okay the way you are, but here he could move and and his brain was able to keep developing. And he, you know, everybody is intelligent. Everyone is intelligent, but we all have different intelligences. We all have different ways that comes out. So we can't force everyone into a cookie cutter position. We have to allow all human beings to reach their potential, and then look at what we get in adulthood in the world when we have that. So thank you so much. I know an hour.
Fantastic job. He's always so well spoken and brimming with insights. But we were talking about the joys of standing. She's probably ready to sit down.
No, I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Yeah, but
People have to go on with their day.
Right, but she'll stay if anyone wants to ask her any other questions, but thanks again.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for doing that. Hopefully they'll. Yeah, I know, right. So I think by next semester it'll be a better day. Yeah, definitely. So one of your parents can end up being yeah, so nice we have that non-monopoly. Fantastic. How's the liquid? Oh. Oh, good. Great. I'm gonna head out. I know one of us didn't want to talk.
Backlash. Yeah.
he's like, and then let's put it down on what. So now. That's. Like. No, I'm thinking. Like, don't say. Like. Like. And he's like, oh, and then he became a person. And he now. Great. Because that huge like but
It's not great, yeah. Now you want like, now you figure out what you're like. Right. So all. I know.
Right. Very. It's Amy Taylor. Like I felt just know, I think it's enough. I'll have to figure out. On all your little. No, I don't know. You're. There you go, you're done. Thanks. No, but we don't have. Yeah.
Yeah, they hardly ever do You know, like, thing, because, you know, I know they have this suicide. Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, the two have hard to check it out early.
So, you know, I think for the Botanic Garden, we're doing the same setup that we did for the Carney Sunday night one. You know, with the, because we're gonna do we'll do the big screen. Yeah, we can't do a hanging screen from the balcony because of all the Christmas decorations, but we'll have this screen,
Okay,
which should be big enough.
yes.
Let
Do
me,
you guys have a podium down here or do you use a table with the stand level?
we have a podium. All right, let me close this.
I want to have the laptop with you, so it's better to have this.
Actually, I drive the bus with the laptop and the ladies that speak are more comfortable if I do the technology.
So it's like the Carney setup where Mr. Carney had the laptop off to the side and did the slides.
Okay.
And then the speakers in front.
Okay.
So she'll need a table next to it,
Thanks for the
just like, yeah, just like we had with the Carney thing. All right, let me shut this file down. And I gotta eject my stuff safely.
Right.
What's just admiring?